Welcome, welcome everyone. Just give us a minute or two. I see people still joining. We will be continuing this discussion today on Pan-Africanism. And here, especially in this breakout room, we'll be looking at building Pan-African connections. So let me just wait a few moments and see if any more people are joining. I see attendees coming in. All right. Okay, so it is 5 past, I beg your pardon. And let us begin. All right. So this breakaway room is building Pan-African connections. And time is not on our side. So I will introduce the first speaker we have this morning, the first presenter, Maricel Mina Lopez. Now, she is a doctor and a master of science in religion. Her field of research refers fundamentally to the study of the Afro-Asian world, with research topics like deities and female leaderships in Egyptian, Ethiopian, and Israelite religious traditions, right? And she's also an expert in the field of gender, class, and ethnicity. So I hand you over now to Maricel Mina Lopez.
Muchas gracias, Michael. Estoy muy feliz de estar aquí participando de este acontecimiento histórico que es justamente el resurgir del panafricanismo, y estoy muy feliz de poder soñar con ustedes en estas redes, estas interconexiones que se pueden mirar hacia el futuro entre el continente africano y América Latina. Estas reflexiones que voy a presentar tienen que ver con el trabajo en equipo que hemos hecho desde América Latina, desde los diferentes territorios, Brasil específicamente y Colombia, que fue donde nos articulamos y nos desafiamos justamente a pensar estas contribuciones que voy a hacer. Como punto de partida es interesante recordar, no está por más recordar de nuevo que no estamos hablando de un bloque único y sólido cuando hablamos de África y cuando hablamos de América Latina. Hay toda una constelación de países con niveles y densidades poblacionales diferentes, específicamente aquí en América Latina, cuando hablamos de la diáspora afroamericana. No obstante, compartimos un pasado común y eso lo sabemos. Y eso lo sabemos, y para eso entonces quiero traer como la metáfora de las ombligadas. Las ombligadas es una práctica ritual que se hace aquí en Colombia en los palenques y que tiene esa idea de interconexión cuando un niño nace, esa interconexión con África. Entonces son las ombligadas de Onansi, que también están representadas con una telaraña, ¿no? Que nos da esa idea de la red que queremos construir. Y me gustaría pensar y soñar esa red más allá de todas las armadillas del contexto neoliberal, ¿no? Aunque sabemos que no, parece ser que no estamos fuera de esta realidad, pero creo yo que es posible pensar y soñar en estas relaciones sur-sur, más allá de este modelo unívoco y también extractivista, porque las relaciones que se piensan y que se tejen, quiero pensarlas mucho más allá que esta economía global neoliberal, ¿no? Entonces, en ese sentido, quiero hacer memoria, ¿no? Un día en tierras africanas, hombres y mujeres contaron historia. Hoy nosotros, los afrodescendientes, ya podemos contar esas historias. Cada uno de nosotras y de nosotres, asimismo debemos contarlas y llevarlas a todas las personas para soñar juntas un mundo mejor de libertad idealizado por nuestros ancestros. Algunas de estas personas las contaron a sus hijos y nietos esclavizados, que soñaron algún día, siendo libres, poder contar nuestras mismas historias. Entonces creo yo que para esa intercolección global tendríamos que pensar en un cambio también epistemológico. Y ese cambio epistemológico tendría que incluir justamente todos estos saberes y todas estas prácticas que vienen desde los territorios. Por tanto, me imagino más allá de estas redes internacionales que de alguna manera sabemos y por la práctica no llegan a los territorios, ¿no? Este modelo global, los dólares no llegan a los territorios, esta idea de mercantilización no llega a nuestros territorios y entonces en ese sentido, ¿cómo salir de estos tipos de colonialismos tan marcados que nosotros tenemos dentro de nuestros contextos? Esa colonialidad del poder, esos racismos, esos sexismos, esos clasismos que marcan la diáspora y el continente africano. Cómo descolonizarnos el ser, ¿no? Esa realidad en la que nos han metido dentro de ese modelo macroeconómico, ¿no? La discriminación, la pobreza, la muerte, la violencia, los extractivismos. Esta es una realidad que se vive en los territorios, ¿no? Contextos de violencia. Aquí en Colombia sabemos todo lo que ha implicado para nuestros territorios esta guerra de larga fecha, ¿no? Del saber, ¿no? Ir más allá de las monoculturas. Hoy se habla mucho de la interculturalidad, ¿no? De esas interrelaciones que se tejen más allá de los grupos étnicos, porque nosotros aquí en la diáspora latinoamericana, una de las constantes que podemos hablar de relación triétnica también con nuestros hermanos indígenas, ¿no? Y tener en cuenta pues estos epistemicidios que también han marcado esto. Y otro elemento que me parece articulador al pensar esas estrategias de alianza es la cuestión de los colonialismos del alma y de la espiritualidad y rescatar una espiritualidad alegre, festiva, transgresora, que nos impulse a hacer cambios, a hacer transformaciones desde dentro. Y esas transformaciones entonces son en el ámbito político, económico, ¿no? Reconociendo las luchas que se desarrollan desde los territorios, tiene que ver con la cultura, con la religiosidad, ¿no? La revaloración de nuestras tradiciones ancestrales. Los indígenas y afrodescendientes en esta convivencia triétnica es una realidad que tenemos acá. La tierra también como fuente de vida, de cultura y de identidad. Creo que este elemento de la tierra, de un derecho a vivir con dignidad, tiene que marcar estas relaciones que vamos a tejer, no solamente en el ámbito económico, sino también en el ámbito educativo, en el ámbito cultural, y por tanto, entonces creo yo que tendríamos como desafío poder hacer como no sé, una lista de todas las instituciones, los grupos de resistencia que nosotros tenemos. Aquí en Colombia tenemos muchos movimientos, el movimiento Cimarrón, las mujeres pacíficas, están luchando allá codo a codo con esa violencia en el Pacífico colombiano, con las casas de pique, donde cortan a las personas, o sea, reivindicación de vida a partir de todos nuestros desaparecidos. Entonces, estas realidades de estos grupos que se articulan tendrían que comenzar a pensar en cómo vamos a hacer esas alianzas, cómo vamos a hacer esa red, porque nos une un elemento común justamente, que es salir de todas estas colonizaciones, de todas estas perversidades históricas que se han realizado con el continente africano y con su diáspora. Seguimos soñando, seguimos pensando en construcciones de mundo diferentes. Y creo yo que tendremos que apostarle muchísimo a estos saberes que emanan de los territorios, ¿no? Esta relación con la tierra. Ayer estábamos escuchando que Colombia está en los países de alerta en esta cuestión de cambio climático. Los efectos del clima están sobre este territorio y sabemos que afecta principalmente a la diáspora, especialmente a las mujeres, a los niños, porque hay problemas de hambre, de desnutrición, de violencia, de confinamiento. lo vivimos, es una realidad palpable, pero no nos podemos quedar en la queja, sino mirar cómo vamos y cómo vamos a aprovechar estos organismos internacionales que de alguna manera pues se dice que quieren apoyar cómo hacerlo. Y creo yo que ese cambio, esa transformación tendríamos que aprovecharlo también desde el elemento educativo y aprovechando también todo este potencial de las juventudes. Ese diálogo que estaban entablando hace poco las juventudes, creo que eso nos llena de esperanza y nos dice sí hay un movimiento panafricano que está mirando para el frente, que queremos transformaciones, que queremos vida nueva y plena para todos nosotros. Entonces, en ese sentido, es que estoy pensando en estas alianzas, en unos grupos de apoyo desde las regiones para que sigamos interconectándonos y sobre todo creo yo que tendríamos que promover estos intercambios también, ¿no? Ellas ya en el panel de los jóvenes estaban alertando este problema que nosotros tenemos también en cuanto a las dificultades a veces con la lengua, pero creo que podríamos hacer alianzas con las diferentes universidades y poder mirar desde allí también cómo vamos a hacer el aporte, ¿no? Desde las academias, pero también mirando al territorio. Creo que ese es un desafío y nosotros afrodiaspóricos sabemos que hemos conseguido llegar a estudiar, sabemos que el desafío es mucho y que no podemos olvidar estos territorios y esta tierra madre que nos está llamando a transformar, ¿no? A una espiritualidad que trascienda, una espiritualidad política que nos mueva y que nos ayude también a liberarnos de toda esta dinámica de muerte, de estos fundamentalismos que tiene nuestro pueblo. Entonces por ahí quedaría como mirándome, en resumen podría decir aprovechar estas alianzas con las grandes instituciones, pero también no olvidar que el cambio y la transformación vienen desde los territorios, ¿no? Entonces las voces de estos actores, de estas actrices, de esta trama que día a día viven, tienen que integrarse. Y sobre todo diría yo que en esas alianzas tenemos que rescatar esos valores y unos principios fundamentales. A veces el dinero no llega a nuestros territorios porque estamos permeados por un sistema corrupto. Y ahí hay que hacer veeduría, hay que mirar cómo hacemos que sea transparente este movimiento que planeamos desde las Áfricas. Con eso entonces, muchas gracias por la oportunidad de compartirles aquí estas intuiciones desde América Latina en este diálogo con nuestra madre África. Muchas gracias.
Many thanks to you, Dr. Maricel. Thank you for sharing that message with us, that message from Latin America. There are so many levels, so many stories to share, as you mentioned. And thank you also for showing us that we need to build these connections to enable all our brothers and sisters, wherever they are, to live a better life, to live in harmony, to live a life that allows for their fundamental human rights. And we mentioned there that the need for transformation, not just political and economic, but also spiritual. And that is something that's very important. I like that you mentioned networking that's needed, whether it be corporate institutions or universities. And you mentioned that particular emphasis on the youth and reminded us that, you know, the change always comes from the grassroots. Thank you so much, Dr. Maricel. And let us see, we have a second speaker. Now, is everybody hearing me loud and clear? I don't know if our attendees are able to respond.
We hear you.
Okay. Will the attendees be able to speak too, if I give them a chance after?
They will have to do chat for now.
Okay, all right. So feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat. right? So that we can discuss those afterwards, right? Now, I will go straight into introducing the next speaker we have with us today. All right, thank you so much again, Dr. Maricel. We have with us also Collins Shava. Collins Shava is an experienced program executive with a demonstrated history of working in faith-based organizations, skilled in public speaking, teamwork, leadership, and event planning. He has strong community and social services profession with a master's degree focused in public policy and governance from Africa University. Collins Shava, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michael, for the introduction, and I hope everyone can hear me clearly. And thank you so much to the doctor who has come in and shared some nuggets of how we can build a Pan-African connections with South America and people in the diaspora. For me, I'm going to speak from a perspective of a young person and a young African who is in Africa, who is also passionate about the Pan-African movement in Africa. And I would like to just share that this, because I think as Africans, as young Africans in the continent, we are the majority in terms of the demographic dividend. In terms of the demographics, we are the majority in the continent, and hence most of the things that are happening now and that will happen in the future will concern us and have so much concern to us. And I'm happy that we are having such discussions that will help us to shape our discourse on Pan-Africanism and to make the Pan-African connections. And as I am saying that as young people, we are the largest in the continent, that means that we are facing so many challenges that are affecting the young people. And we need to have young people in Africa leading in many ways to reach out to reignite the Pan-African movement in Africa. I would like to start from a point where we recognize that in 1945 and beyond that time, the Pan-African movement was ignited by the need to free and to set free independent nations in Africa. And it was clear, the vision was clear, and everybody was ready to die for that vision to liberate Africa. And by 1994, this movement had reached this place, and it had reached its goal to liberate Africa. And it was even, this movement was even pushing the goals to unite Africa. But now, fast forward 2021, we have young people who are stuck in a quagmire, or who are stuck in a space where they cannot tell what discourse to follow, what will be the rallying point for us as young people to have that Pan-African connection. Because now we have so many challenges that we are facing, and they are coming from different countries and different contexts. But we have binding problems like unemployment, poor governance and political governance, political leadership, lack of space in those spaces, lack of recognition, lack of access to resources, and so many more. And it becomes more difficult for us to answer the question about what is our mission as young people, as a generation. What is our mission to be sure that we can be able to build that Pan-African connection? And for me, I see that as well as an opportunity for us as young people to come together, to sit together, and to find that connection around Ubuntuism, around build a connection around what we call the African unity, where young people, where in Africa you can be able to freely speak and freely move to one place to another, to live there, to enjoy life there, and to enjoy. So for me, that is what should be our rallying point around African unity. And most of those issues that we struggle with, they can come and congregate around that, where we are congregating as young people around unity, around nation building, around continent building as well. So I think as young people, we will need to have that rallying point, and we will need to be behind that rallying point. And we also, with the youth in the diaspora, some of the youths in Africa have left to go to the diaspora. Some of them already there, they are descendants in the diaspora. How do we make those connections with young people who are in abroad to ensure that we can be able to feed into our nation building, to feed into continental building? We need to make those connections with our fellow brothers and sisters that have gone abroad, and some who were born abroad and they have the roots in Africa. And that is also what is key for us as young people, to create that unity, to bridge that gap between us who are in the continent and those who are also in the diaspora. And I think if we, by this, we can be able to say, let's build a network, let's build networks of young people who are working together for the progress of Africa. Let's build networks of young people who are working in different thematic areas. Let's build a network of young people who are into entrepreneurship, innovation, and other forms of employment. Let's build connections of young people who are into arts, culture, and heritage. Let's build connections with young people who are promoting indigenous knowledge systems in the continent. Let's build connections with young people who have gone abroad and still have roots in Africa. And that is my message as we talk about building Pan-African connections, that we must not forget the voices of the youth as the elders, and we must also continue to work in building those youth networks. And with me, these are my thoughts. Thank you, presenter.
Thank you so much, Mr. Collins Shava, for that input there. Your talk really reminds me of my days as a young man. I'm not so old yet, but listening to you especially reminds me of some of that youth, that vigor as a youth, and that hope that sometimes, wanes away with the years. But you remind us that it is very important for us to remember that the youth make up the greater majority of the African population, and the youth, we can see them highlighted, we can see their influence in the music and the arts, but also we must be aware that many are marginalized, and the majority face numerous challenges: poor governance, political leadership, lack of employment, and other opportunities for income generation. This is a big issue. And so we need to build those connections of young people in Africa, out of Africa, in the diaspora, create those connections to build bridges, to advance different areas of professionalism and different skills, and just to keep that connection going. So thank you again, Collins Shava, thank you so much. Now, do we have any questions in the chat? Please feel free to comment in the chat and put any questions that you may have. I see we have some more people who have joined us, right? So just to remind you, we are in this room, we are talking about building Pan-African connections, and we have had two presenters. We listened to Dr. Maricel from Latin America, who gave us a perspective from Latin America. She spoke about Colombia. She has a background in religious studies, as well as advocating for female rights. And we spoke to we listened to Collins Shava, a young man who spoke to us about the importance of remembering the youth and the need for those connections to bring the youth in Africa and in the diaspora together. Now, if I may be allowed, you know, my own personal story, I can tell you that I speak to you today from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. I'm here by accident because the Mod Communications Manager, I'm here today. But I was actually born in Uganda, right? I grew up in England, I lived in China, and I now live in the Caribbean. So, you know, this, I think I have a Pan-African journey that so many people may relate to, I am sure, right? So we have 15 minutes left in this session. Yes, thank you. Questions, please. Questions, please. There are questions in the chat. Let us see. For some reason, I cannot see these questions. Mr. Frank Chikane, I don't know if you can see the questions. Well, what I can do while we see about these questions, I can say to Dr. Maricel and Collins Shava, listening to each other's presentations, is there or are there any questions? If you could ask anything that came to mind, anything that caught your attention particularly from the other speaker that you would like to press them on or inquire more, please do so. I will ask Dr. Maricel, is there any question you would like to present to Collins Shava?
Michael, I see a question in the group.
Yes, please, if you can see the questions, please respond. Thank you.
There's, my experience is, that's where Frank Chikane says, Reverend Frank Chikane, my experience is that most of African and Latin American youth are not very conscious about Pan-Africanism. What should be done to raise the consciousness so the linkages can be made? Yeah, that is a very good question. But I understand that in my experience with young people, with working with most young people in the continent, the consciousness is there to some extent, but you can feel that it needs to be channeled to a direction. And there are young people who still idolize some of those Pan-Africanists. And you can see that it is still in them, and those who are even woke and all that. But now there is a generation which is maybe beyond my time, which is probably Generation Z, as they call it sometimes, or the millennials, where you find out they spend more time on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And when it comes to many things that concern their lives, that is political participation, that is even African consciousness, and all that, it has gone away. And I think what we need to do now is to have a messaging that is really targeted to the young people, that we are working with the Generation Z that is coming up, so that us who are in influential positions or in civil society or in these such initiatives, we have messages that are targeted to attracting the young people that are there. And also, if we could do more to provide mentorship to some young people in our spaces, that would also go a longer way in teaching our young people. And another thing that could happen and change things, it is more of the decolonizing of the education system in Africa, where most of the education system is still inclined to our colonizers and is still inclined to America, Europe, and the Western world. and also now Chinese influence into our education system. Let's Africanize our education system to ensure that young people are grow with the consciousness of Pan-Africanism, the Pan-Africanist history, the spirit as well can go. But it's a long way, it's a long shot, but it's the most effective way of also capturing that. And we need to be loud with decolonizing our education system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Collins Shava. Nice. Dr. Maricel, would you like to respond to that question? Someone is asking about the prominence of Pan-African consciousness in Latin America. Is that something that is strong? Is that something that is weak? And tell us some more about that.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Yo considero que la educación en América Latina continúa siendo monocultural. A pesar de muchos esfuerzos que se hacen desde las instituciones, por ejemplo, en abrirse a la interculturalidad, a los diálogos, creo que son categorías que vienen también del mundo europeo. La interculturalidad de alguna manera nos ha colocado a dialogar a todo el mundo en condiciones iguales y se ha de alguna manera invisibilizado las causas particulares de los grupos minoritarios en América Latina. Y ahí entonces entro en las luchas de las negritudes. Yo creo que tendremos que hacer un cambio fuerte epistemológico. Y ese cambio epistemológico tiene que ver con la manera como nosotros aprendemos y nos educamos dentro de nuestras raíces, dentro de nuestros saberes que son afrodiaspóricos, que tienen que ver con esta matriz africana, que tienen que ver con pensar un mundo diferente, más allá del antropocentrismo, pensarlo más en una dimensión mucho más ecológica. Ayer hablaban del buen vivir, o que también es tradición de los pueblos africanos. Si nosotros nos recordamos un poco la tradición de los misterios egipcios, el sonum bonum, el buen vivir, o sea, nosotros tenemos muchos elementos filosóficos que vienen desde allá. Creo yo que todavía hay que trabajar muchísimo porque el legado colonizador no viene solo desde las colonias de América Latina. Nosotros vemos en nuestra tradición bíblico y teológica ha sido muy fuerte y muy concentrado este eurocentrismo, pero también este semitismo, esta negación de que existe un saber filosófico africano que está colocando y que coloca en jaque también el pensar de ese teocentrismo, abriéndonos mucho más a dimensiones holísticas, abriéndonos también a otras perspectivas de la manera misma como accedemos al conocimiento, no tanto desde el método deductivo, sino más inductivo. O sea, nosotros tenemos mucho que aportar en las diferentes áreas del saber. Y creo yo que ahí están los desafíos, y esas alianzas tienen que proporcionar también un cambio fuerte epistemológico, porque creo que sin educación los cambios y las transformaciones se hacen mucho más lentas. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maricel. Yes, education continues to be a challenge, not just in Africa, where we have a very Eurocentric education system. Many education systems would not have changed even from the time of my parents. And I can say that firsthand. And we hear from Dr. Maricel that the situation in Latin America is not too different, where the histories of many of the indigenous marginalized communities is many times brushed over. So as we continue with the discussion on building Pan-African connections, we have heard about the youth We have heard about communities in Latin America. Please do continue putting your insights. You can put some comments in the chat. You know, what are your reflections from the speakers that you have heard thus far? We have about 5 minutes before we move back into the main room. So let us see. Well, I will present some questions. I'll let this 5 minutes be, sorry, do I see a question here? How to continue to advocate the International Decade for People of African Descent, thematic objectives of recognition, justice, and development for impact in the lives of youth. I see this question coming up here, right? How do we continue to advocate the International Decade for People of African Descent, and looking especially justice and development, especially for the youth? Would anyone like to respond to that? We have this decade of recognition of African people. I mean, people of African descent. Is anything positive coming out of it? Do people know about it? Do people celebrate it? Or is it just another day or another decade that will pass by? Quick response, please, from each of our speakers. Collins, you first.
Thank you for that, Michael. I think for me, it remains a day, a decade which we are recognizing, and the operational frameworks around it. And you can see that it ends in 2024. I think much more since it started in 2015. There hasn't been much in terms of the traction around the International Decade for people of African descent. And I think maybe going forward with the remaining years, it's more of how do you continue popularizing it, and the needs that and the demands that are being made by that. And I see that, of course, you cannot spell gloom on it already, but there is some after effects of it that we see in Ghana, where there was the year of the return and so forth. So, but we need to continue advocating for this, and we also need to look at how we continue to mainstream young people into the operationalization of the thematic objectives of the International Decade for People of African Descent, and also to ensure that we also popularize it among the people, and also see that beyond the International Decade, what other key things can we do for young people, and what other key things can we refine to fit the agenda of young people into it. So that's my quick take.
Thank you so much, Collins. Dr. Maricel, this decade for recognizing African and people of African descent, what's becoming of it?
Bueno, yo creo que al inicio de esta década hubo un trabajo bastante fuerte de cohesión, por lo menos aquí en Colombia, con los diferentes grupos y movimientos sociales. Creo yo que se han conseguido pues grandes cosas, sobre todo el empoderamiento de muchas de nuestras juventudes, la generación de muchos grupos de conciencia negra alrededor, por ejemplo, del cabello, de la belleza, de muchos movimientos que los jóvenes están empoderados y resistiendo, también desde la cultura popular, también desde el reggae, de estos movimientos de resistencia creo que se han formulado bastante. No creo que el impacto más allá de estos grupos haya sido muy fuerte a nivel nacional, incluso internacional, más allá de los grupos y movimientos de negritud. Creo yo que Todavía podríamos trabajar mucho más en proyectar y generar una conciencia mucho mayor más allá, porque es que a veces la idea es que es una década de negros para negros y pensamos desde aquí, y creo yo que ahí es donde es un problema serio. Esto es parte de un derecho de humanidad, por tanto debería trascender todas las instituciones sociales en los países, ¿no? No solamente desde nosotros como grupos hablando a partir de nuestras luchas y nuestras conquistas. Yo soy muy optimista en ver todo un movimiento de juventudes supremamente empoderado, ¿no? Aquí en América Latina lo hemos visto en el contexto de la pandemia, en esta realidad tan dura, ¿no? De hambre para nuestros pueblos, y creo yo que los jóvenes fueron aquellos que salieron en medio de esto a protestar, a reclamar. Entonces yo tengo mucha esperanza en nuestras juventudes. Pues,
Thank you so much, Dr. Maricel. There is hope indeed. There is hope. There's always that fire burning inside of all of us, and we should never lose hope. Thank you so much. I see it's 1:45. Unfortunately, we have to come to the end. Thank you so much, Dr. Maricel. Thank you so much, Collins Shava, for sharing your stories with us. And thank you for those who've attended this session. I hope that it has been very insightful and that you have increased in your knowledge and awareness of the Pan-African vision and the push to build Pan-African connections all over the world. And I hope that we can all do our part wherever we are to build these Pan-African connections. Thank you so much. Now, I believe that the link to go back into the main session will be shared in the chat, right? Let us see. There should be a link to go back to the main session in the chat. If you cannot use, right, I see the link there. So if you click on that link, you will be taken back to the main session, or you can go back to the auditorium and join that session. Okay, thank you so much. Stay safe and stay blessed.